History happened everywhere.
The verdict.
This is our after show podcast where we look back at the most recent episode, Jack-O-Lantern in South Korea, during 2020 to 2025. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and check it out, or else you will encounter spoilers ahead.
Spooky spoilers.
Spooky spoilers. Hello, my name's Pete Goddard. I'm here in the studio with my spooky soulmate, Ryan Weir.
Spooky soulmate.
And we are joined, as ever, by the dazzling, the daring, the disarmingly direct, Paul Dersley.
Good evening.
Good evening, Paul.
Mr. Dersley. We did warn of spoilers ahead. We should probably warn of bangs and crashes ahead because it is fireworks season, so there may be some pops and crackles in the background. Be not worried, we're not on fire. It is simply fireworks season.
Yeah, hide your pets.
So are you a fireworks guy, Mr. Dersley?
Well, I'm more a fireworks guy than a pumpkins chap.
So what kind of fireworks are you into? Are you a Catherine Wheel, a Rocket Man, or do you just like a sparkler in the dark?
Well, I like the sort of those cakes that you can buy nowadays. Some square number like 25, 36, 49. Little fireworks all in a box, aren't they? And you just light the box and they all go off. And you sort of get a semi-professional display at home.
Purchased one once, and you know how we're always really bad at calculating distances and square miles and meters and just generally maths and volume.
We are, yeah.
Yeah, we bought one of these boxes and didn't exactly understand correctly the distance one was supposed to be away from this box. We put it in and we set this thing off and it was far too close to the house. And we basically all ran for cover as soon as it started. I've never seen a group of adults run quite as quickly as when we recreated the song in my back garden.
The noise of a firework, it sort of makes a very distinct noise, doesn't it? That sort of... I wonder if I could replicate that noise with just some Dersleyisms. So it's like a... Oh, God!
Well, you'd have to sort of put me on a trolley and move me very fast relative to you.
I'm willing to give that a go.
Penny for the Durs.
Penny for the Durs.
Guinea for the judge, I think.
For our American listeners, the penny for the guy is a
tradition of children dressing a...
sort of stuffed person, like a scarecrow kind of thing, not on a stick, but stuck in a trolley, pushed around and asking for a penny for the guy.
Yeah, who was Guy Fawkes.
Who we then put on the bonfire and murdered.
It was a great tradition.
Yeah, burn the man. Right. I think before we move on, we should remind ourselves what we talked about with some sort of, 60-second long recap.
That's a good idea.
Who could do this?
Well, I could do it for you.
I think you should try.
All right, let's give it a go. When do I start?
I think you should start right about now.
Well, this week's episode was a Halloween spooktacular. The focus was on Jack-O-Lanterns in South Korea from 2020 to 2025. But to tell that story, we had to first dive into Korean history, recounting the difficult journey the country has taken to get to its current place as a showcase nation for technology and growth. We talked about the celebration of Halloween and the origins of its iconic image, the Jack-O-Lantern pumpkin. An Irish prankster called Stingy Jack, whose deal with the devil set him on a crash course for eternal damnation. We learned about all the different varieties of pumpkin that are grown around the world, and we learned that the classic Halloween Jack-O-Lantern variety is difficult to find in Korea, but we discovered that the future of farming in Korea will no doubt soon allow for every store in Seoul to have as many big orange pumpkins for carving as they can sell. Finally, we delved into the spooky side of Korean folklore with an exploration of the mischievous goblin called the Dagepi and the mystifying legend of the egg ghost. All while Pete ate Korean treats and carved his very own HHE pumpkin. That was last week's episode done, summarised nicely. Nice one, son. Now we're over to a young Dersley, who's gonna tell you what he thought of thee. He'll take you apart without any care. He's the lovely Paul Dersley. The lovely Paul Dersley.
Excellent stuff. Thank you very much, Ryan. So, Mr. Dersley, just overall, how did you enjoy the episode? Are we going to be looking at generous grades or a stingy Ders?
Stingy.
Oh,
I thought that was a Dagepi.
Ah, Now we're being
ghost
haunted.
on the line.
We're being haunted by Dersley the egg ghost.
South Korea is one of those places that I suppose you could say is a bit overshadowed by sort of Japan, and so when you think of that region, you think of Japan rather than South Korea. But certainly, I'd like to visit it. It would be interesting, as I have been to Japan, to sort of look at the similarities and the differences.
See, in some ways, I felt that South Korea feels like a kind of new Japan almost, with the brands and there's the electronics and the cars and the sort of technology side of life. So I think that comparison actually is quite interesting, because culturally and sort of technologically, South Korea seems to be really going on right now.
They're definitely taking like a cultural stance, though, like of their own. I think mainly through sort of the technology. A lot of the brands are brands that we would recognize here in the West, but also through culture. So the TV shows, the movies, the K-pop is all starting to sort of permeate around the globe rather than just within that area.
And I read that was a very deliberate policy. The government funds this stuff to push Korean culture out as a sort of aspect of its national diplomacy.
Well, it seems to be working.
So, well, I'm glad we got Squid Games, if nothing else.
Well, and Gangnam Style.
Well, maybe not everything. But I was interested, Ryan, in how Halloween has been in doubt, you were saying.
Yes.
It's a bit uncertain, but it's happened now. So how did Halloween go down this year?
Right, so Halloween 2021 in Seoul. Okay, well, on the Friday the 29th of October this year, 272 people were caught by the police for violating quarantine rules. They have fines of 100,000 won, Korean won, or roughly $85, so I guess about £65. Plus, not only did they get the fine, they would get a notice of reprimand sent to their residence or sponsor.
Ooh,
that's interesting, isn't it?
Permanent record, as they would say in school. People were cuddling up too close to each other, weren't they?
Yeah. There was one thing that I read in the news, though, that apparently there was a lot of unfair blaming of foreign visitors, or rather, there was an accusation of that, with a lot of deportation warnings being issued.
Wow, that's radical.
The streets were absolutely rammed with people partying. South Korean confectionery maker Orion, they launched a limited edition version of their Choco Pie called the Halloween Choco Pie. It was a marshmallow sandwich, which they put with pumpkin-flavoured biscuits, corn-flavoured cream in the middle, and a pumpkin-flavoured chocolate glaze.
That sounds wildly unappetizing to me, I'll be honest.
I tried to see if I could get one, but I couldn't, unfortunately.
That's
I guess
very
they were
fortunate.
stuck to South Korea. There was the Venti, which is a South Korean coffee chain. They created the Pumpkin Shaky, which is an iced pumpkin smoothie topped with sweet beans and vanilla ice cream, served in a special Halloween-themed cup holder.
This is what I really despise about this so-called Halloween.
What, the commercialism?
Well, it's just for its own sake. It just goes around and around and around and around, and you just sort of think, God, are people just so stupid?
There's a lot of money to be made in this.
So I understand your objection to the commercialism, Paul, but I have to ask you, can you possibly object to pets in Halloween costumes?
Why should pets be dressed up anyway?
Oh, are you telling me you wouldn't love to see a little doggy in a jack-o'-lantern outfit?
A little Jack Russell jack-o'-lantern.
Jack Russell-o'-lantern.
Talking of dogs and pets, there was one pet cooking studio, which is a thing, apparently, a cooking studio.
Pet cooking?
Yeah, where they made and sold... No, not before you get down that line. These guys make food for pets, not of pets.
No, I was in a different place entirely. I was thinking, how can a pet cook anything?
Oh, I see. Right. So they made and sold Halloween-inspired cookies just for dogs.
Oh, Jesus. God almighty.
What's so upsetting about that? If you've got a little dog, you want to treat it to a Halloween treat, you go to the little pet store, get some Halloween cookies.
Well, it's this herd mentality, the stupidity of it.
People got too much money, you're going to be saying next.
Yeah, having all fun on their own
But
terms.
it's not
The
fun,
fools.
is it? It's not fun, is it? When everybody else is doing the same thing at the same time.
I think that's very much part of what appeals to people, to be honest with you. You're dressed up as a sexy cat on your own, are you? In July.
Just finishing that bit off. So the cookies that they created, some of the little Halloween-inspired ones, were inspired from the Netflix show Squid Game. There are some candies that were in that show, and so they replicated those so you could buy some of these cookies for your dog. But that leads me to the next point, which is that costume-wise, the Netflix show Squid Game was the biggest inspiration for the people of Seoul by almost everyone. Everyone, those pictures, you just look, there are tons of people wearing the red outfits, jumpsuits, or the green tracksuits that were famous from the show.
But that's good news though, right? Because that had a big full-faced mask, as I recall, which means, you've got your COVID-safe costume on.
Yeah, there were people from Seoul that were complaining, like residents that were saying people are crazy and they shouldn't be in this much close proximity. We've just been through COVID and people weren't wearing masks under the masks, if you know what I mean. But what is interesting and why it is good is that for the garment industry, it's now raking in money just from making these costumes from Squid Game. Apparently, just one factory is producing 6,000 of their green tracksuits a day. So just one. So there are that many costumes that are being produced, and they're shipping them out to Japan and around the world as well. So
that's a costume with legs as well, though, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, you've got a tracksuit.
It's just a green tracksuit. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so there you go. So that's Halloween in Seoul this year. So big news.
One little fact that talking about pet food is if you came on hard times in the future, should you eat dog food or cat food?
I'm saying dog food.
I'm going to go with cat food, just because that way we've covered both
Someone's going to be right. We nailed this, Ryan.
Yeah. Okay. So as ever, Pete is correct.
Oh, what?
No,
what's in cat food then?
You should always go for dog food because for some strange reason in this country, dog food is classed as fit for human consumption, whereas cat food is not classed as fit for human consumption.
Are we talking about tinned foods?
Yes. I've always wanted to put it in vol au vents and see what people say. Don't tell them, of course.
No.
I'm not sure. I used to have a cat a long, long time ago, and cat food smells absolutely disgusting. I don't know if dog food has the same quality.
When I was sort of a younger and still living with my parents, my poor old cat never really got fed when they were away because I wouldn't open the tin because it smelt so disgusting.
So you just let the cat starve?
Well, no, it could eat those things that blow up in its stomach.
Okay, right. Yeah, I've been ruined because I've never had a cat, so I've been ruined by the commercials which show me deliciously tuna-laced tins of food that everybody enjoys so much.
No, it all smells of I don't know. It smells disgusting. My mother even had a special fork for cat food.
A cat food fork?
Exactly. It had a black line painted around it. Which seems a bit stupid. I'm sure the dishwasher could have got the cat food off it.
Well, yeah, didn't you sack him? So Halloween, we talked a bit. I asked about the Halloween colours. I observed that the pumpkins, which I think we'll also like to talk a bit more about, was it the orange of Halloween, the orange of a pumpkin? And I had a little read about that, and I learned that the orange was actually the orange of Halloween prior to pumpkins being the classic jack-o'-lantern, because as you said, they started as turnips, didn't they, in Ireland? And it was much later that the pumpkin came on. But actually, the theory is that actually the black and orange is the black of night and death and spookiness.
Yeah.
But the orange is flames, autumnal, the sort of light and darkness of that kind of period. So actually it's entirely coincidental that I suppose not entirely coincidental, it's still an autumnal colour and it's an autumnal squash, but it doesn't come from the pumpkin. The pumpkin is incidental.
Oh, that's cool. Paul, when did orange become a thing? Isn't it one of the last colours or something that was discovered?
Yes, it was. The fruit was named before the colour.
So it was called an orange?
It was called an orange.
Okay.
Because orange was just called golden or a shade of yellow. A lot of it does go back to orange, of course, as well, being William of Orange, sort of the king.
Course, yeah.
And, the story about carrots turning orange.
Right, because they weren't originally orange, right?
Yes, carrots were generally sort of lots of different colours, but mainly sort of purpley.
So when would we have expected orange to be like the colour orange then? Around that time?
I don't know the details, but I think it will be around about that time, yes.
Right, but it does beg the question, are there colours that we have yet to name?
I'm not the person to talk to about this.
Why?
I'm colourblind.
Oh, right.
Oh.
But I think naming colours is really quite a deep subject, isn't it? Because the colour that you call green might not be the same as the colour Pete calls green.
Oh, I see.
Whereas if we say it's RGB 02550, we all know what it is.
Yeah, fair point.
I can tell you for a fact that there are colours that my partner is able to distinguish that I am not.
Really?
It's like there's blue. So, well, that's not blue. It looks like blue to me. No, that's puce or
interesting.
taupe or something. I don't know. One of the many colours that I don't really understand.
Knowing the names of... Well, first of all, it's knowing the names of the colours. That's fortunate if you're able to distinguish them. But I just can't think of which way around this is. But something like either the word blue or the word green was quite late, the split. And the colours that we now call blue and green would have been given the same name.
So basically what I'm getting is, in the beginning, there was red and not red.
Right. It's a good job there weren't paint companies back in the day, because we'd all be talking about Arabian sunset yellow and
misty morning,
ducktail green.
Well, the one that gets me is elephant breath.
I mean, I can picture that though.
I can too.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. I don't know what it smells like though.
Hay
currant buns.
And oh dear. Let's move to pumpkin talk, Ryan.
I love pumpkins. Ask me questions about pumpkins. I could tell you anything.
Well, first of all, I have to ask.
I'm the pumpkin king.
What is the Latin name?
Pumpion, wasn't it? Pumpa. Pumpy.
Sorry, that my mistake. It was a badly formed question. What's the binomial name of a pumpkin?
Mr. Pumpkin?
My brain just melted. I don't know what that means. All right, I rephrased my point. Ask me some things about pumpkins that I know about.
Ryan, could you tell us some things about pumpkins?
Well, okay, so we talked about a lot of the different varieties, right?
Yes, in great boring detail.
I thought you'd like that kind of thing. That felt like science.
That too. I thought you'd like all the different names.
Yeah, it would be interesting if some of the names were not Halloween related.
They did seem to name pumpkins like they named paint colours, actually, didn't they?
What was the one? Long Island Cheese, it wasn't though? That was a good name.
Crazy Lantern, Jack of the Mad.
But one of the things we didn't talk about was giant pumpkins. Giant pumpkins grow at a rate about 100 times faster than your typical pumpkin. In about one day, they average about 20 to 40 pounds worth of growth.
I'm struggling to envisage that.
20 or 40 bags of sugar.
So that's like put your arms out and
holding
whole armful
a crate of sugar.
Right.
Is that right?
Yes.
First of all, it puts on 40 pounds. So you've got to give it at least 40 pounds of water or nutrient a day. An hour or whatever.
A day, yeah.
You must be able to watch it grow.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm getting James and the Giant Peach vibes
you
from
see
this.
plants grow.
You can watch rhubarb grow.
You can hear rhubarb when it's growing.
Yes.
Right, look, let me tell you about the world record.
Go on. I've in my head, I've got a pumpkin that you could chop the top off, hollow out, and just go paddling around a lake in.
There's a guy who did that this year.
No way.
That's literally what happened. How weird.
Because that was my
Did
first
you know?
thought. No, that was my first thought.
That's so weird. That was literally like the image on most of the websites. It was this guy who had won a competition somewhere, like a local level, and then had hollowed it out, jumped in it, and was paddling around a lake in it.
No
So
way.
how strange. Anyway, the world record was broken this year, 2021. It was grown by an Italian farmer, Stefano Chetruppi. And it weighed 2,703 pounds, the weight of a small compact car.
2,000, that's over a ton.
It is, yes. 1.2 in fact.
You could make the Cinderella carriage with one of those.
It would be for a child, but yeah. And also they're quite slopey and sloppy. They're not like big round ones. They all kind of give up to gravity at one point. Mike Schmidt, though, let me tell you about Mike Schmidt of Wisconsin. He grew a pumpkin that was 2,520 pounds, so just 250 pounds less than the world record holder. But he was disqualified because it had a crack in the pumpkin, the size of a fingernail, and it was enough to disqualify him from it. It prevented him from winning $20,000, and he said, it happens. There's no crying in pumpkin growing.
There's no crying in pumpkin growing.
I thought there's a nice...
Words to live by.
Right? How about that as a phrase?
Awesome.
All of these pumpkins are just grown basically to be destroyed, aren't they?
Yeah, I think some of them make like pies and things, but I don't think you'd make that out of a giant pumpkin.
Only so many pies you can get through with a pumpkin the size of a hatchback.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, did we put pictures of the magnificently carved pumpkin on the website?
They are at hhepodcast.com.
Check them out. So on the subject of pumpkins, you talked about Jack-o'-lantern, and Jack actually just carried the lantern, didn't he? Because I always think of Jack-o'-lantern as having the pumpkin as his head.
Yeah.
Right? So I did a bit of digging on that, and actually there's a number of characters in comic books and myth of people who have pumpkins for heads, but it's not Jack-o'-lantern. So I'm going to ask you if you recognise any of these pumpkin-headed characters.
Okay.
Starting off, this is a man on a horse who terrorized a town.
Christopher Walken.
Correct, but who was he playing in the movie?
Well, he was playing the Headless Horseman.
Headless Horseman,
Of
sometimes
Sleepy Hollow.
portrayed as having a pumpkin as a head instead.
Does he?
Sometimes, yeah.
A pumpkin?
Yeah. Okay, this one is someone from a 1990s line of superhero comics published by Malibu Comics in the Ultraverse.
Right, well,
I'm not expecting-
I'm going to let Paul get this one.
I think we've lost Paul completely with the mention of comic books.
Sorry, I have you come back to normality yet?
Okay, well, that was Lord Pumpkin. You were very close with that guess there, Paul. Then there's the character Jack Pumpkinhead.
Oh!
Sherman.
Let's see if we can hear him.
Hey, thanks very much. You're welcome, sir. Cheers. Thanks. Bye. No, where were we?
You were going to have your final guess about this character who is from another comic book called The Sandman. He's a jaded, wisecracking, cigar-smoking janitor.
With a pumpkin as a head.
Are we supposed to know this?
Mervyn Pumpkinhead from The Sandman. Oh, you people.
Hong Kong Phooey.
Hong Kong. What are you just saying? People now. This is.
Well, you said
the
word,
weirdest pumpkin-headed
You
competition.
said the word janitor, and that's the only time I ever heard the word janitor as a child.
The mild-mannered janitor, Hong Kong Phooey. I couldn't
I
get behind that.
see. Right. Okay.
Anyway, well, that was a quiz that you magnificently
Failed at.
underachieved on. So, nevertheless, we
Okay.
will move on.
So no. Before we move on, so there was the Pumpkinhead
Jack Pumpkinhead.
called Jack Pumpkinhead. I think it was. No. From Wizard of Oz.
Oh,
Or
that's Jack Pumpkinhead.
Return to Oz.
Yes. He's in a number of the Oz things, actually.
Okay.
Jack Pumpkinhead.
Right. So he was a thing.
Yes.
I want to say that Jack Skellington from The Nightmare Before Christmas.
I wanted to say that too.
But
And I
he's
checked
just
he's
got a
not.
skull.
He's just got a funny head, right?
Wait, Skellington, right?
Yeah.
So he's got a skull.
Nevertheless, let us move along
Yes.
for a moment. Mr. Dersley, you made some threatening noises about the reception of this episode. However, you did warn us that we shouldn't be talking spookies and ghosts and goblins. And I think Ryan did a rather good job presenting to you technology, the future,
Agriculture.
science, agriculture. So I want to know what you thought of all of that business, because I thought you'd like it.
Do you know, I honestly can't remember that bit.
Vertical farming, smart farms, you can work from your phone. Cubes, technology, South Korea doubling down on
printing food.
not quite printing, but
You
not
didn't
needing.
listen to it at all.
seal
Was
off
it in the one that you sent me?
Yes. Yeah. You fell asleep, didn't you?
Do you know, I did listen to it in bed.
He's nodded off for the tech
I
bit.
do not want a grade from you on this episode. You're going to just give me a bad grade because it's Halloween, thinking that it was just about spooky stuff.
There's a whole bit about high tech
And you
farming.
fell asleep during it. I mean, that is the worst grade of all, that you fell asleep during it.
I can tell you there were no sketches in it.
There's one sketch.
It was one sketch.
Was there?
So, yeah.
Where?
Fell asleep.
Was this at the, was
You
this at the end?
jackanape.
Was this at
It
the
was
end?
at the end, yeah. Yeah.
Right at the end.
Right at the end.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so one of the things that we talked about was pumpkins. I said that it's not easy to, or rather, you can't buy like a jack-o'-lantern classic or a big orange pumpkin.
Well, a pumpkin
South
that's
Korea.
already got the face carved into it automatically.
That sort of thing, yeah. So no, what I was suggesting is that because we had to look at the future, I was looking at vertical farming, which is indoor farming, basically, digital greenhouses, and I was talking about all of the process for how that's done, and that by 2025, there's a very real chance that these technological digital farms will be producing larger vegetables like pumpkins. Mm-hmm. All flooding back.
So, one of the criticisms is it's mostly leafy veg and berries and high calorie items, and so pumpkins isn't really one of the things they do at the moment.
I do remember you were talking about sort of lights and things.
Lights and things,
Lights
exactly.
were
and
definitely
locking the
mentioned.
insects out and having to pollinate with a wand, a vibrating wand. I thought that would have stuck with you.
Okay, I do have to put my hand up. If a vibrating wand was in the episode, I never heard it, so I must have been asleep then.
It was definitely in there. You fell asleep.
Right.
You're going to now sit there in your court chair and judge me based on what you've heard.
Right, here we go.
Have you had enough gloating yet?
Yes.
Yes,
No, I'm
exactly.
loving it. This is all going in.
Right. Judge Dersley, you expressed reservations and an expectation that it would be myth and legend and spooks and ghosts in the episode, but lo, Ryan has presented to you technology, farming and the future, science, all things that I think you'd enjoy. So what did you make about all the farming and technology aspects of the episode?
Well, if I was awake, I would have known.
Do you remember us talking about the Dekepi and the egg ghost?
Yes.
Ah, okay. But what are we going to do about the actual verdict?
We could do the verdict. It's not going to affect your score, is it? It's still going to be crap.
I would hope so. I would hope that it would affect my score.
Right, so we've come to a critical question, Paul, which is, have you ever wrestled a Takepi?
Funnily enough, I haven't.
Do you fancy your chances in the ring?
No, I don't think so. I wouldn't fancy my chances against a 3-year-old girl. So
Well, this is probably the one fight you're actually going to win, and not because of the one-leggedness.
yeah,
It does help, but mainly because in every story the human wins.
It is a bit stupid, but given my luck, I'm sure I could be the one that breaks that rule.
You'd be the first to break the Dekepi rule.
I'm actually genuinely more interested in your response to the thing that I really struggled to stop laughing about, which was the egg ghost. Have you ever come across an egg ghost?
Yes, and you did laugh a lot about that, didn't you? I think I lost my way a bit then.
All right, well, look, so I felt bad, actually, after that,
We
because we
mocked the
were
egg
mocking the
ghost
egg ghost so much.
relentlessly.
And I was just curious. I'm like, so what actually is it? Why do people
doesn't
scared
do
of the egg? And it turns out it's not an egg, right? So the egg ghost is the most fearsome ghost in Korean folklore, right? And the most deadly. And this is the bit that I guess maybe I hadn't.
Did you skip
pulled
over the
out? Yeah. So some say that Dalgalguishin is a childless ghost in that it has no descendants or any relatives left alive to hold a memorial service for it, which, as we spoke about before, is an important part of the culture. So without any friends or family, which are the things that make life meaningful, the egg ghost is cursed to essentially a wretched existence in the afterlife, where it has no emotion, it has no personality, it just sort of floats through existence.
A bit like Elon Musk.
Hence why it's devoid of a face, it's featureless, and it has no personality.
I rest my case.
It's got no family. Oh, that's really sad.
Right? So,
I feel bad about laughing about it now.
Well, exactly. So because it has no personality, its face is featureless. It has a smooth surface.
But that doesn't sound deadly.
Right. Well,
it doesn't sound deadly, but if you see like a person exactly as a person with hair and everything and with a blank face, it is quite a shock, actually.
right. Because like we're geared to seeing those things, right? At a real psychological fundamental level, I guess. As a baby, it's probably the things that you're picking out first is like the features on a face. So to not have that would be really unsettling. And also the lack of humanity attached to this spirit means there is no communicating with it. It can't be bargained with. There's no begging it to let you go. So it just mercilessly drains you of life or of anyone who encounters it. Apparently they are mainly found in the forested mountains, and they'll stalk you before getting you. So you'll be lost in these dense mountain forests. You'll end up like falling asleep and then being woken up during the night, and this ghost will be in the corner of your eye, and you'll just get closer and closer, and that's it. Or you won't, yeah. But it's not just in Korea. The myth, the legend of the egg ghost is found elsewhere, including in Hawaii. May 19th, 1959, the Honolulu Advertiser reported that an unnamed woman visited the female restroom, and she was stood watching a woman comb her hair when this woman turned and revealed she had no face. The witness, she was reported to have been admitted to hospital for a nervous breakdown, having seen this. And in 1981, a radio broadcaster told this story and dismissed it as fiction, said this is just rubbish, only for the woman to call in to the radio show and give more details on the event that had been unreported. So it must have been her. And she said that this, what they referred to as a mujina in Hawaii, had red hair. Anyway, the drive-in no longer exists. It was torn down to make room for public storage. But the point being that you could be one day just going to the restroom and you'll see somebody combing their hair and they might turn to face you, and forever you'll be haunted by the egg ghost.
Just another reason not to go to public restrooms as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, filthy places.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it, that?
I think it's creepier than we gave it credit for.
I think we didn't do it justice. I would agree with that. There was a lot of detail you didn't bring to the table.
No, but that is a very deep fear or something primal. Actually, I could tell you that. Years and years and years ago, I was burgled, and the chap who burgled me obviously had a stocking or something over his head, and I only realised this he walked into my bedroom, and I sort of woke up and saw this man without a face, which was, in a sense, it was actually quite good because I was so shocked with that I didn't do anything, and he sort of ran away because if I'd have worked out what was going on, I'd have possibly done something, but I shat myself. But apart from that,
that's terrifying, Paul.
It was
what
actually
a horrible experience.
But the thing that I to this day remember about it, and as soon as you mentioned somebody without a face, that came straight back to my head. It was that he was obviously wearing a stocking mask or something,
right?
And sort of in the I think he was backlit or something. It just looked as if he didn't have a face.
Or you were burgled by the egg ghost.
Look, it's no yoke, all right? Stop yoking around.
So,
shall we move on?
Shall we indeed? Let's move on to the next section.
So before we get to the verdict, Pete, I was just wondering whether I could just give a bit more detail about the future for South Korea. So we talked about sort of the technological innovations that are happening, and I mentioned about the drone taxis, if you remember, flying cars, and how there is a program in place at the moment to try and make that happen so that by 2025 there will be these two ports and you'll be able to get in a flying drone and be flown across the city. Well, I looked into that a bit more. The Korean Urban Air Mobility, the KUAM, is a plan that will see personal air vehicles, or PAVs, commercialised by 2023, so much sooner than I thought.
Really soon.
These are flying cars. They are two-seaters. They fly autonomously, although they did like this public survey and said, do you want an autonomous flying car or do you want somebody actually flying it? And public, by a high margin, said, we want an actual human pilot.
Which is interesting because that would probably treble the price of a ticket.
Yeah, well, yes, exactly. Anyway, so that has happened, and they've agreed that a human pilot will be present. But there is an argument over who will actually fly the vehicle. Will you need to have a helicopter pilot's license or an airplane pilot's license? Because it's a drone and it uses rotors, is that similar to a helicopter in that it also takes off vertically and lands vertically like a helicopter, but it flies horizontally like a plane?
I would rather trust my life to a teenager with a VR headset and an Xbox controller. Those guys know what they're doing.
That's true. They do. Yeah, that's who I was.
Exactly, right?
They're battery powered, so there's zero emissions. Their height hasn't been agreed yet, but they fly up to around about 600 meters.
Ooh, that makes me feel a bit queasy.
It's quite high, isn't it?
2,000 feet.
Yeah, they have a range of 161 kilometres.
And finally, 161 kilometres is exactly 100 miles.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, so 100 miles in one of these things. They fly fast, 320 kilometres an hour.
Wow.
200 miles an hour.
200 miles an hour. Yeah, you can fly from Western to southern Seoul in 5 minutes.
That sounds great.
It takes you 50 minutes by metro or subway. They're quiet, 65 decibels, which is about the same as a vacuum cleaner. And they are safe. So they've got 4 rotors on them. Some of them have got more than that, 6. And one company is building one of these flying cars like a glider. So it's got long wings with the rotors on the end. So that in the event that the whole thing just goes, it will just glide to the ground.
Is this rooftop to rooftop travel we're talking about?
Yeah. So there's talk of having at first, there'll be stations. So you'll go to the station like a mini airport. Yeah, you'll take off and land from those. But it's getting to a point where there is a company that has 3D mapped the whole of Seoul, and is looking at whether or not you can just land on any rooftop for these things. There are helicopter pads across most of the skyscrapers in Seoul.
Well, I suppose there are historical precedents for that, isn't there? Because if you think about the Empire State Building, that big radio, everyone thinks is a radio mast on the top of it, it's actually a Zeppelin landing point.
Oh, is that right? That's fascinating.
Yeah, so they were thinking about, they would take the Zeppelins into sort of the Empire State and the people would disembark down into the top of the building.
Straight into the city. Yeah, of course. How wonderful. Can you imagine seeing like a whole Zeppelin right above the Empire State Building? That's
apart from
incredible.
it's full of hydrogen.
Each flying car is worth 3 billion Korean won, which is 2.6 million US dollars. So, I guess 2 million pounds.
Right.
Yeah, you would expect these to get cheaper as you're building more of them, though. I mean, the prices are estimated to go down. So a ticket ride, 20-minute ticket ride, they're saying from the airport to West Seoul would cost approximately 20,000 Korean won or 15 US dollars or just 12 UK pounds.
That seems very reasonable.
Yeah,
that's all right.
That's what they're heading towards. So they,
It's going to take you a long time to get your 2 million quid back.
If these things are quite fast as well, you can actually do quite a lot in an hour.
Absolutely. And if you've got, there's only 2 terminals that they're building at the moment, but by 2030 they're going to have 10 terminals. And you think how many that they can up and go pretty quickly.
I do admire an ambitious country. They sound like a bunch of guys with plans.
They have plans for sure.
Sweet.
Yeah, there you go.
He's the judge, judging all of the things we does. He's the judge. His name's Paul Dersley. All rise for the judge.
Right, I want a grade.
Right, yes, let us move on to...
I'm desperate for a grade.
How did Ryan do? Let's find out. So I would like you, first of all, Judge Dersley, to consider the matter of factual content. Your grade, please.
I'll give Ryan a C for that.
C?
Okay, I'll take it.
Acceptable.
C for Korean.
This might be controversial, but I'm also going to need a grade for spookiness.
Well, I didn't know that you were going to say this, but I'm afraid it's an E.
E for spooky because
not
you don't
enough?
like spookiness, or
Was there not enough spookiness?
Okay, I would give you. Let's just say it was not as pathetically spooky as I thought it would be. So yes, I could accept that. I'll give you a C+ for that.
Oh, nice.
That's very good.
Thank you
I
very much.
personally think you let yourself down with the egg ghost, which would have been much scarier had you described it as you did just now.
Yeah, it wasn't as funny, though.
No, it wouldn't. Back to traditional factors. Dersley factor.
Well, this is a difficult one because I really didn't know what a jack-o'-lantern was. I just thought it was some Irishman, but clearly it is an Irishman, but from a lot long ago, further ago than I thought. I'm gonna have to concede that you did beat my expectations somewhat. I'll give you a C again.
I like this. Straight down the board.
I thought that was going to be a B for a moment. So, and now, the main event, the real deal, the final judgment. Mr. Dersley, how do you judge this episode?
Well, I'm going to step out of my comfort factor, I suppose, and because I fell asleep halfway through it. I will grant you a B-.
Whoa!
Ooh. Remarkable outcome. I think I thoroughly deserved B-, to be honest.
Well, thank you very much. I wish I could carve it into something so that I would remember it.
A commemorative pumpkin,
Yeah.
a turnip perhaps. Pop a little candle in there
That's a great idea. I'm going to carve a turnip with B- on it.
and put it on the website,
I love it.
hhepodcast.com.
Actually, it's... well, I think on the Wikipedia page, if you look at it, that carved turnip that they have on there is rather sinister. It's much more sinister than a pumpkin.
It's true. It is true.
It looks a lot more like a face because it's smaller and sort of triangular.
Right. Oh, spooky. Spooky time.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed the episode. I think that was a well-deserved grade, Ryan. I thank you greatly for your contributions.
Thank you, Your Honour.
And I thank you, Judge, as ever, for your wisdom and knowledge.
Well, I don't have much knowledge on Halloween because it's not really my subject. Well, it's not a subject full stop, is it?
He's the judge, judging all of the things we does. He's the judge. His name's Paul Dersley.
So that is our show for this week. Thank you once again, Ryan, for your excellent contributions.
My pleasure.
Thank you for your wit, wisdom and judgment, Mr. Dersley.
My pleasure again.
If you'd like to get in touch about any of the things we've talked about on the show or just say hello, you can reach out to us on social media or through our website at hhepodcast.com, or you can email us at peteandryan@hhepodcast.com.
Yeah, we'd like to hear from you. And you never know, you might end up featured on a future show. One way to definitely feature on a future episode is to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It's super important to us and to new listeners that you just let them know that we're out there.
And if you're a social media fiend, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, any of those things, you can find us at HHE Podcast. And if you subscribe, you can get an alert when we post little 1-minute videos that we do.
Okay, so we're going to be back again soon with another episode. It's going to be Pete's episode next.
Yes, it is. I will be talking about the NATO countries in the time period, well, not really a period, but once upon a time,
Yeah.
on the topic of ecology.
I don't know if that's a tricky one or not. I just don't even know where I'd begin with that. Anyway, so I'm looking forward to hearing about it.
I'm looking forward to finding something out as soon.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, that's going to be next week, so look out for that. In the meantime, if you can't get enough of the show, check out the back catalogue of episodes. There's loads of them now. They're all in your podcast app. They're on YouTube. They're on our website, hhepodcast.com.
All right, that's it. So, huge thank you to the judge himself. Thank you, Paul.
Best regards.
And thank you, of course, the man who made it all possible, Ryan Weir.
Thank you very much.
And that's it. I guess all that's left to say is...
You've been listening to
History happened everywhere.
The verdict.
Okay, Mr. Dersley, here's a quiz for you. I will give you a different country's version of cheese, the word you say whilst having a photograph taken. And you have to guess which country uses that word for smiling when taking a photo.
Okay,
Okay.
Here we go. Cheese.
America.
Most of the English-speaking world.
But also Switzerland.
Oh, right.
Presumably Swiss cheese, I guess.
Right.
But do they say cheese? So do they say cheese or do they say Casse? Or does it depend whether they're French Swiss or German Swiss?
The Swiss use the English cheese.
Oh, okay.
Okay, who says whiskey?
Scottish.
Japanese.
No, it is the Colombians, also in other parts of Latin America.
Whiskey.
Who says, and this is the translation, smile at the little bird?
What's the birdie? The French.
No, that is the Dutch. I think there are possibly others that say that as well. Who says apelsine?
Appelsine.
Which is orange.
It sounds French. I didn't say Canadians.
Dersley?
I would say Belgium.
Ooh, he's closer. Denmark. The Danes say that.
Okay.
Okay, who says khabeez, which means bread?
Is it some Arabic-speaking country?
Is. You're in the right
Sounds it,
ballpark.
Egypt.
Close, very close.
Tunisia.
Oh, even closer. Morocco. And finally, paneer.
Like the cheese.
Yes.
Well, that would be India, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Well, there's also the Turkish. There are various slightly different pronunciations of the same word.
Okay.
Gem.
Gem.
This means jam.
Jam.
Yeah.
Jim.
Iran.
I'm going to go with Iran.
It says here Poland. Poles say jam.
Jam.
But it does seem odd to me. That one was the one that didn't have an E in it. So,
Right, yeah.
I'm not 100% sure about
When
that.
you-
So
when you
any
say that-
Poles listening, do write in and let us know that is true.
When you say that, like your mouth goes closed, if anything. Jam, your lips go together. Okay, my question to you then. What does Dersley say when he has his photo taken?
Oh, for goodness sake.
That's exactly right. 10 points.
But yes. Or don't you have anything better to do? I have a Chateau Angoudet Margot, a claret. 2011, 10 years old. Rather.
I have water.
And I have an empty glass.